Have you ever wondered what a criminal mind reveals when it knows the end is seconds away? When time no longer matters, when there is no more escape, no lie capable of protecting you? What happens when the only remaining witness is your own conscience? Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to hear now may completely change the way you see the mind of a killer. She still visits me in my dreams, and every time I wake up, I'm covered in blood. This was the phrase left by one of the most enigmatic convicts on death row. Words scribbled on a piece of paper, found next to a cold body, but with the eyes still open, as if the soul was trapped there, repeating the story one last time. And it was not an isolated case. On the contrary, there is a dark, almost ritualistic pattern to the words whispered just before the final silence. Today, you will delve with me into the most disturbing confessions ever recorded by soon-to-be executed criminals. And it's not just about requests for forgiveness or belated declarations of love. We are talking about revelations that changed the course of investigations, exposed secrets buried for decades, and in some cases revealed crimes that had not even been discovered by the courts. But why does someone decide to speak only when they can no longer be judged for it? What happens in a killer's mind moments before death? Is it his fault, delirium, or a last attempt at control? Criminal psychology draws attention to this exact moment, the one between the awareness of death and the last breath. It is in this space that the most disconcerting phrases emerge, the confessions that often make no sense until a new crime is discovered. And that's where the suspense begins. Because some of those last words sounded like delusions, but then they revealed exact locations of missing bodies. Others, said with a weak voice and trance-like eyes, implicated people who had never been investigated before. There are people who say that in these last minutes, the mind begins to confuse the real with the symbolic, mixing trauma, hallucination, and desire. But what if it's not delusional? What if it's a code, a call for justice, or worse, a warning? Have you ever stopped to think about what really motivates someone to kill? And what happens when that same person is forced to face, for the last time, what they tried to hide their entire lives? This video will explore the darker side of human behavior. What does criminology reveal about a criminal's last seconds? What can criminal psychology decipher in the eyes of someone who is about to die and knows they deserve it? And most importantly, why do some feel no regrets at all, but still decide to speak out? Get ready to hear stories that have been hushed up for decades. Confessions hidden on tapes, burned letters, sentences spoken between gritted teeth. And they all have something in common, a truth waiting to be discovered. And that truth begins now. This incessant search for answers to understand what goes on in the minds of those who commit such horrors reveals a lot about our own nature. The line between sanity and madness is thinner than we would like to admit. And perhaps that's why it's so difficult to shake off the ghosts that these killers leave behind. Now, as you reflect on everything you just heard, I want to hear from you. Which part of this story impacted you the most? Could it be that, in the end, the true punishment of a serial killer is to carry forever the shadow of their own victims in their nightmares? Or is our morbid curiosity, in a way of trying to understand something that we can never fully understand? If this topic makes sense to you, I'd love to see what you have to say. Leave a comment below, sharing your thoughts, your opinions, or even what touched you most. What do you think really goes through a killer's mind moments before execution? What did you think of this disturbing confession? Every comment here makes all the difference, so that this space continues to grow and share these intense and reflective stories. The cycle of trauma is a powerful and destructive thing. Painful memories and traumatic events, especially those that have not been addressed, tend to recur, not only in memories, but also in behaviors. The obsession with repetition, the desire to relive an event continuously and uncontrollably, is something that can manifest itself in very different ways. For a killer, this repetition can become a psychological act of punishment, a way of reliving the pain of what he did, but also a way of maintaining control over his own emotions, which in some way escape his understanding. This type of obsession is often found in people with dissociative disorders, in which the line between reality and delusion becomes increasingly blurred. That's why it's so difficult for them to leave the past behind. He never abandons them, and it is in this constant internal struggle, in this conflict that seems to have no end, that we reach the final moment of the journey: execution. The man who was sentenced to the worst possible punishment has his last chance to express himself, and at that moment, this is where words, or the lack thereof, gain even greater weight. Murderers often speak just before their death, but what they say is recorded forever, like an echo in the memory of everyone who hears it. Some words are banal, others try to justify your actions, and there are those that have simply never been said before. As was the case of a famous murderer who, as he was being led to his death, whispered something to the officer accompanying him, something so simple but at the same time so powerful that no one could ever imagine. He just said, "I know she was right, but I couldn't stop. I didn't know how to stop." And what remains is the question, what did he mean by that? Who was she, and what did he really feel? These last words, these silent confessions, are in a way a reflection of everything these people were not able to process or deal with while they were still alive. They represent the unspoken truth, which has never been explained. And perhaps, as much as these confessions torment us, they also teach us something important, that the truth does not always set us free. Sometimes it just opens wounds that never close, and what remains is the deafening silence of unspoken words. This silence is not just what remains for the killers. It also reverberates in society, in the victims' families, in the invisible victims, who carry the weight of the trauma throughout their lives. But deep down we wonder, does the truth really heal, or does it just open up the wound, making it even more painful? Now, talking about all this, it is impossible not to notice how much these stories fascinate us. The psychological appeal of true crime is something that always takes us out of our comfort zone, makes us look into the abyss without falling into it. And what does this reveal about us? Perhaps the quest to understand the human mind in its darkest form is actually a way to protect ourselves. By understanding the monsters that live in the world, perhaps we feel safer, more prepared, or perhaps it's just the desire to understand what leads us to make such extreme decisions, to break rules, to defy morality. With this, we are faced with an essential question. Is it that deep down, this quest is really to understand the psychology of these criminals, or are we in some way trying to understand ourselves? The abyss, after all, is always closer to us than we would like to admit. Now, before continuing with the next stage of this story, tell me, what has touched you most so far? Comment on the word that made the most sense to you during this moment. Let's continue on this journey together. Well, if you've made it this far, it's because you really connected with this content, and that means a lot to me. These topics, so deep and disturbing, require special attention and an open mind, and I am grateful that you took this journey with me to the end. If this theme made sense to you, if the reflections on what really goes on in someone's mind, the obsession with repetition, and the last words of a murderer touched you, leave a comment saying, "This message was for me." This not only helps me know that you were here, but it also strengthens our community, making these conversations richer and deeper. And of course, if you liked the video, leave that like. It's a simple but super important way to show that this type of content is valuable to you. And when you like it, you help ensure that more people connect with these topics that, however uncomfortable they may be, deserve to be discussed. Oh, and if you want to continue in this universe, there is a video here that complements everything we talked about today. Click there and stay with me there, because there is still a lot to explore together. Let's continue unraveling these stories that, although scary, help us understand a little more about human nature. See you soon. And if you liked the video, don't forget to leave a like. It helps to strengthen this content and, most importantly, allows more people to join this reflection that we are creating together. Your participation is what makes this channel stronger. With more people connecting and exchanging ideas about criminology, criminal psychology, and everything that involves the darkest side of the human mind. And if you haven't signed up yet, sign up now. This way, you will be able to continue following everything that is coming without missing any details. Here, we are always exploring the most complex and darkest minds, bringing real stories and stories that will certainly move you in a profound way. Your participation here is essential. Let's continue this journey together, exploring the mysteries that inhabit the deepest parts of the human psyche. Now let's move on. We still have a lot more to explore. The diary was found by chance, mixed among unimportant documents, thrown aside as if it were any piece of the story of a man who, until that moment, had been considered irrelevant. But what was there, in the simple words devoid of any remorse, transformed an already known story into something much deeper and more disturbing? She still visits me in my dreams. This phrase, written in shaky and hurried handwriting, was repeated throughout the pages, obsessively, as if it were an immutable sentence. A silent confession, an obsession that was dominating the mind of a condemned man, but who had no peace even in his last moments. The question arises almost automatically. Who was she? What did this woman that hovered over this killer's mind mean? Was she real, or a construction of her own fault? A concrete woman or a symbol? A specific victim whose death tormented him? Or the figure of a distant and abusive mother? We don't know. The only thing certain is that she was there, in every thought, in every nightmare. And perhaps, if it were just a projection of one's own mind, this image would be even more terrifying. Because the ghosts we create in our minds can be much crueler than any human being could be. Now, when we observe this diary, something else begins to emerge between the lines. A disturbed mind. Perhaps a psychopathic mind capable of maintaining this type of obsession. Antisocial personality disorder, which characterizes many of the most cruel criminals, is something more complex than simply a desire for violence. It involves emotional disconnection with others, a lack of empathy, and often a feeling of superiority, as if society's rules do not apply to these people. The FBI, in several studies, pointed out that more than 85% of serial killers have this type of psychological pattern, clear traits of psychopathy that become visible even in childhood, with behaviors such as cruelty to animals and an almost total absence of remorse for their actions. This pattern can be identified in different degrees and forms, but what is certain is that these people tend to have a distorted worldview, where the pain and death of others are of no importance at all. So what do they say when no one else can? Hear them? When the end is near and execution is inevitable, the confessions that happen in the last minutes of life are often the most revealing, the most surprising. Many murderers, before being put to death, make statements that leave us perplexed, revealing details that were previously hidden. Sometimes this happens out of guilt, the weight of a crime never truly atoned for. Other times, the relief of knowing that finally the pain and torment of a lifetime is about to end. And in some cases, there is a certain need for display, a last act of control before they become irrelevant. It's difficult to imagine what goes on in the mind of someone who is about to be executed, but the truth is that at that moment, many feel an urgency to speak, to confess. Imagine then what that might mean, being there hearing one last truth that never came to light. Something so intimate, so disturbing, that it can reveal the biggest secrets of a lifetime. And no matter how hard we try to understand, something will always remain silent. Like the mystery of the woman who still visits this killer's dreams, without us ever knowing who she really was. Now, returning to the female figure that haunts this man's dreams. Who is she? Some psychologists believe that it may be a representation of the guilt that the killer carries, maybe a specific woman, maybe a metaphor for all the victims of his violence, or perhaps a distorted maternal figure reflecting the childhood traumas and dysfunctional relationships that marked her formation. We can't say for sure, but what we do know is that this obsession, this repetition, is a direct reflection of something very deep and disturbing in the killer's mind.